You know, when I grew up, and I think it was the golden age of video games, you basically had games that came out of nowhere and they were just so different than everything else when it came to storytelling. Like, for example, the video game Postal, or the video game Manhunt, or Soldier of Fortune, right? Like you had games that would sometimes shock, but they shocked in a good way. You know, kind of like South Park Season 1 shocking. It was something that you would be ashamed to play if your parents were in the room. But at the same time, it was incredibly fun, and most people tried to play it. Take into account that GTA was like this, right? So Grand Theft Auto was a very edgy game for its time. I mean, you get to run people over, Carmageddon as well. And it actually created an entire franchise. But if you look at video games now, they are incredibly sanitized. Most of them seem to have the same type of story, same type of jokes. Everything is incredibly safe. Like you will never find something edgy or offensive in any of the AAA games. And that's not good because art is supposed to be a little bit offensive. You see a fountain with a little cupid that's perfectly anatomically correct, and it's got this little cock, and the fountain is taking a piss as the water is coming out. You know, like these things were popular at the time, and they had like this little thing that's offensive, and it stimulates conversation. Especially when you look at Greek statues, like all of them are anatomically correct. They have titties, they have cocks, they have nipples, and then when Assassin's Creed decides to make that, they censor it. Why did they do that, right? It's because you need to make sure that nothing is offensive, nothing is haram. And again, the fascinating part is that if you look at our society as a medieval society where you have the peasantry and the nobility, and you think of BlackRock and the bankers and MasterCard and Visa as the nobility, well, the nobility is the ones that demands the censorship for the peasants. Because the peasants absolutely love edginess. I mean, there's a recent game which came out with two brothers, Lele and the Coffin or whatever the fuck. And it seems that video game has cannibalism, it's got satanic rituals, it's got murder, but like one of the endings seems to have incest, right? And everyone is freaking out, like the nobility mostly, and their peers are freaking out. It's like, oh my god, it's got incest. While completely ignoring the fact, well, actually it has gratuitous violence as well. So when you have these companies that are claiming, oh, well, it's for a modern audience, the reality is that they create what the modern audience is. Like they're the ones that dictate what the modern audience should be. So let me explain to you how a company thinks, right? Like when you have a video game like God of War, or when you have a video game like Alan Wake, these video games usually cost millions of dollars to make. Some of them can cost up to hundreds of millions. The investor just wants his money back, right? Like if you're thinking about the investor, they don't really care if it's a work of art. They don't really care if people are going to play it 10 years from now. All they care about is like, how much money do we put in and how much money do we get out? And they care about like, okay, long-term monetization strategy, like how are you going to sell more DLC? How is the in-game store going to be like? How are you going to convince people to still play? Like, this is what they care about as a priority. And they also care, it's like, how can we get access to easy cash? And the answer is sometimes ESG money, right? So basically, you go to a bank and you're saying that your game is not going to cause any social controversy. That's what the S from ESG stands for, is social, right? So you're not going to get the journalists upset, you're not going to get politicians to talk about it, you're not going to get the media to be upset. So how do you do that? I mean, if you're the CEO or if you're the investor, like you're not the one that's going to write the story for the game. You probably don't even know what is offensive and what isn't. So you have to outsource, right? And due to this, like due to the persecution culture that we live in, due to the cancel culture, there was a need in the market for people that can vouch for your work of art. Like they will vouch that activists aren't going to be upset. And this is where things like Sweet Baby comes in, right? So Sweet Baby, as you can see, has experienced narrative designer, writer, producer, manager with a history of working in the game industry. And what these ladies do is, as you can see, story pitches, world building, cinematics, character creation. making sure they don't have a lot of booba helping you with that budget cuts, narrative design, cultural consultation, sensitivity, and inclusivity training. So basically, if you guys remember how back in the day they would criticize stuff, it's like, oh, there's violence towards women, or oh, there's not enough representation, blah, blah, blah. And all of a sudden, those criticisms stopped. Well, it's because the AAA companies started subcontracting their stories to Sweet Baby, and the activists know that if they were to criticize the company for its depiction of whatever, the company can just go, well, actually, we hired these guys, so you should criticize them. And it would be like the left attacking the left at that point. And that's why they don't want to do it. Because the whole purpose of criticism for sexismus and racismus into video games was to create these types of companies. Was to create these types of activist-driven storytellers that will then work with AAA companies. And as you can see here, they have many clients and many people that they work with. And you can see here like Sweet Baby Inc. And that is the whole purpose, right? And I guarantee to you, like, if you were to work with other companies that weren't ideologically driven, then all of a sudden the journalists wouldn't like your game. Even if you have, like, the same themes. This is the explanation of why video games made in Japan get a lot of criticism, but, like, video games like The Last of Us don't. This is the explanation of why you can have bear sex in video games, and they can focus a lot on pornography, and the journalists like that. But if you have like something like Saran Kagura, all of a sudden they freak out and they say that it's bad. It's not really about the content from the game. It's all about whether or not you're bending the knee to the activists. If you give control to the activists to write your story, to write your characters, to decide which joke stays and which jokes get removed, this is what it's all about. And this is why like so many games, especially AAA games, all of a sudden are very similar to one another in storytelling, in plot points. Why all the characters kind of look the same, why all the female characters look androgynous, why you have body type A, body type B in all video games, why the vitiligo thing is getting popular, right? So like vitiligo is this very rare skin disease, it's like very few people even have it, but all of a sudden almost all video games with character creations have it in, and it's due to companies like Sweet Baby. I mean, this isn't the only one, there are several, but I guess like this is in the public spotlight now. However, if one of the people working there is saying, yeah, we need to do more for representation, like, what can we do? Let's get people with the vitiligo skin disease represented. Then all the games that they work with, all the AAA companies that they work with, they will say, yeah, you need to have this in. So this is why, like, it seems that all of a sudden all these companies are operating in lockstep with things that make no sense. Like, sure, you know, like one company deciding to represent the skin disease would make sense. But when you have like 3 or 4 major titles coming up and they all do it at the same time and it wasn't done before to this extent, it makes you wonder like what's happening behind the scenes. And what's happening behind the scenes is that they're subcontracting ideologically driven writers that are completely disconnected from the market. They have no clue what the player wants, but they do know what the game journalist wants, they do know what the academic wants, they do know what the politician that they support wants, and that's why they're pushing in the games. And this is why all of the games, they're so similar, and you see that all these companies are making similar decisions all of a sudden by, you know, using body type A and B as we talked about previously. Let me know what you guys think, though, and as usual, I will see you in the comment section. Take care.